I have the honor of introducing Juan Pardinas, and he is the general editorial director of Reforma, which is an independent newspaper based in Mexico. He was appointed in 2019 after a pretty exciting and interesting career. So I'll take a minute just to go through that. He was the general director of the Mexican Institute for Competitiveness, which is a nonprofit research and public policy center in Mexico. He was also a professor for the National Autonomous University of Mexico and the London School of Economics, and actually served as a correspondent for CNN covering India and Japan. He holds a doctorate from the London School of Economics, a master's from the University of Sofia, based in Japan, and a degree in political science from the National University of Mexico. So very impressive, rich background for a chief editor. On a personal note, I'll mention, I met Juan shortly after he started as part of the Google News Initiative project in South America, and just was very impressed by his sort of his vision, his leadership, and I think Reforma was actually, the best publisher in terms of converting from kind of legacy print focus before he started to being one of the best digital first, focused on transformation, one of those kind of publishers throughout the program. So just very, very impressed by his work. And with that, I will let Juan take it from here. Thanks, Juan.
Thank you, Arvid. Thank you for that very kind presentation. Just yesterday, I was listening to the podcast by Ersa Klein in the New York Times, and he was interviewing a journalist called Anna Sale, which specializes in hard conversations. And she has a podcast about, the topic says a lot. It's about death, sex, and money. And what I thought is that we are going to have and we are having through this symposium of matter economics, a hard conversation, in the sense that we are talking about ideas, experiments, learning process of an industry, and the financial sustainability and future prosperity of an industry, which is not any kind of industry. It's one industry that it's kind of the breathing system of democracy, the breathing system of democratic politics. It's hard to find a human right as the freedom of expression that it's so intertwined with the functioning of a market. And this, in this case, is the market of ideas, the industry of publishing, of journalism. So this really, it's a hard conversation. And as the podcast of this journalist, Anna Sale, says, it's not about death. I would like to put it in a more positive light. It's about sustainability, about prosperity, about the future. It's about money because it's about financial sustainability. And I'm sorry to disappoint that it's not, my talk won't have any sex content, as the podcast says. But let me start with this hard conversation and what we have learned so far. First, as you have heard from other presentations, what we have learned is that content is the king in this industry. Segmentation is the queen. How you reach different audiences, how you learn about what each reader wants. If content is the king and segmentation is the queen, we would say that the reader is God. So we're moving to a very theological question, which is basically, how do you interact with this God? How do you determine your conversation? How do you learn with this audience that will basically define the prosperity and the future of your company, of our industry? And basically the only way we have to talk to them is through data. As the presentation says, in God we trust, but everyone else should bring data to the table. Which kind of data? That it's a tough question. We should get different kind of data for different kind of audience. And for me, as when I was starting as a director here in Reforma in Mexico City, the collaboration with Matter Economics was crucial, because as might happen with other newspapers that are gathered today here, we are, our house was built on paper, and it has been very successful company for almost a century. So starting to have this conversation, this hard conversation, this inevitable conversation on how we have to trigger and accelerate this digital transition. Matter Economics team was key to jumpstart this conversation inside Reforma. And for that, I would always be grateful to Arvid, to Catherine Ruane, how the several conversations started through the work with Matter, and how we start inserting data in the table. Reforma was born in 1997, but the first newspaper of the company started in a city in the north of Mexico, Monterrey, almost 100 years ago. So I'm sure we all have these kind of war stories of the challenge to bring this transition and start this hard conversation in the context of companies that have been decades or almost a century and have been very successful with a business model that needs to change. And the best way to have these conversations is precisely using data. We came from a different kind of place that most of newspapers, because Reforma made a very daring decision sometime in 2003, and it was to create a very hard wall to access digital content. As you may see in the presentation, in this article in the Economist from 2009, it talks about how Reforma was one of the first newspapers to build this very hard wall to isolate our editorial content from anyone that was not a paid subscriber. And basically that model survived from 2003 very successfully until 2020. Which when this hard conversation led us to think that maybe we should try to appeal to different audiences that we were not reaching through this very hard paywall. So in this case, we are walking a kind of a different path that most of our competitors and friends in the industry, because most of the newspapers are moving from having no wall at all or having a flexible wall to having a kind of a subscriber digital system. We have implemented this for almost 18, 19 years. And we have to have a more flexible, have more windows into the wall, so new audiences could see what we are doing, why it works to take out their credit card and become regular subscribers. In this conversation, in this kind of tipping point in the trajectory of Reforma as a group, the work of Matter Economics was extremely important for us. And having okay, as I was saying, the challenge we have was to work in a different way. So in the beginning of 2020, we reinvented the paywall to offer more flexibility to distinct audience segments. And try to define the patterns of consumption of our editorial products with the most detail we can. And this came from a context where we usually just print the paper, send the paper to more than 100,000 homes in Mexico City, sell the paper in the streets, and basically didn't know what our readers were choosing, which were the favorite editorials we had. The company was so successful in paper that we didn't bother in a way to ask these questions, and it took us time to start considering, well, why we are relevant to our audiences, which kind of information they are looking. Sometimes success becomes an obstacle for change. And in this case, despite the success that the company had for decades of centuries, it was about time that we would start wondering how we could reach a different audience experience and what we could learn from them. A new paywall allows non-subscribers to register and access limited editorial content. This new audience opened the opportunity to access to new potential subscribers. And Paul Berwilt was speaking of something I consider very important in this, and it was about making mistakes. Obviously, when you are doing experiments, you do make mistakes. Bad things happen, and sometimes hypotheses don't come out as you thought they were. And we work in an industry that mistakes are extremely punishable. You cannot have a mistake in a front page of the newspaper, because that could mean the end of your journalistic career. That could mean that the professional future of a colleague is in peril given making a mistake in journalism. So bringing these ideas that we should test and we should be open to fail doing these experiments has been an extremely interesting experience on the context of a group of colleagues which work every day, every week, every month, every year, doing their best, verifying everything in order not to commit any kind of editorial mistakes. But at the same time, we should learn that in this trial and error effort, this constant search for what is the right tune, how we could understand better this constant learning curve, we need to learn mistakes. So for me, that has been a very interesting experience to try to create an environment of tolerance, of learning in an industry, in a company, and a profession, journalism, which mistakes are not and cannot be allowed. And the truth is that this is, there's no magic formula here. This is not like the Colonel Sanders and KFC, that you find the right formula for the fried chicken that millions of people would like, and you get the formula and you get the chicken and you get the problem solved and you get the financial future of your company basically guaranteed. Basically here we have to change the recipe of the chicken every given time with different challenges. Now with a change in an algorithm, in a search engine, we really need to rethink the whole model. So human beings that lead these conversations, that lead these companies, the companies itself as a culture, as a group of people, as a team, we need to start kind of walking at the speed of these changes, and how a simple change in algorithm could really put us on square one and start the whole conversation from the beginning. but in a way we have to see this with humility and modesty in order to be more open to commit mistakes and be more open to the learning experience that force us this change in the context of digital platforms, that it's a permanent market of disruption and change. One of the things that have worked very well, and it came part of the conversation with Arvid and Catherine, was the importance of newsletters. We didn't have any newsletters at the beginning of 2020. Now we have 4 different newsletters, one of soft content of what should people do in the weekend. Obviously, in the context of COVID-19, that idea went into the freeze and then was reshaped of what could you do at home during the pandemic. And then 3 different newsletters, one for subscribers, one for anonymous followers, and one for registered followers. And we select the content for each of these groups, and so far has been one of the most successful schemes we have made. Then we changed the landing platform for subscriptions. Basically, we thought that giving a lot of options to our potential subscribers will help them in the decision process. We offer them more than 20 different subscription packages at the end, and thanks to analyzing the data, we found out that this was not the best idea. From 21 different packages, we simplified just to 3 packages. And for example, we have seen with this very basic layout, we have seen a relevant increase in the amount of people that subscribe yearly instead of monthly. We even have weekend subscriptions before they're not working anymore. We have these 3 packages which make the decision-making process of our potential subscribers much more easier. And as I was saying, this is a continuous learning process. There's no magic formula, or the magic formula that works today maybe won't work in a year or 6 months. So you need this sense of constant challenge to have very clear focus on certain objectives, on certain goals, but at the same time understand that the terrain could change and the map is not territory. What you expected, the route you expected to follow to achieve certain goal will not be necessarily be there on the digital realm as disruption occurs so frequently. And there are several routes to strengthen the attraction and permanence of new subscribers. All this goes through very strong content. But in that regard, I was very confident. I'm very confident in the work of my colleagues here in the newspaper. That itself was not really the problem. The problem is how to learn to build these bridges with different audience, and how to make the digital package of this strong editorial content reach to the new audiences, to younger audiences that most of them are not so willing or not so open to pay for digital content besides Netflix and Spotify. To pay for digital reading material is, at least in the context of the Mexican market, it's not a tradition. Real-time information also helps to understand the traction of the content. We are not leaving the decision of our front page or the hierarchy of our news to an algorithm, but sometimes a news that appear in print in page 3 or page 4, suddenly we find out that has a lot of traction digitally, and we start asking which questions we didn't answer in the first draft of this news, how we could take it further to satisfy this urge that at the beginning our original hunch did not expect that had that kind of reception in our audiences. So that was also a constant learning process by the hour in real time, to test your hunches and to have clear goals. One thing that MATHER insisted all the way was A/B testing. I think we should be very familiar with this. We should not fall in love with our hypotheses, because we could get to confront very tough realities when we see the data, when we see the results. We should not fall in love with our hypothesis, but we should fall in love with the testing mechanism. But because we could learn a lot, that would make much more easier our hard conversations. And I want to finish with a metaphor from Africa. The metaphor says that every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up and knows that she has to run faster than the faster lion in the group, because if not, she will not see the end of the day. At the same time, the lion knows, the lioness in this case, knows that she has to run faster than the gazelle, because if not, her and her group will go at the end of the day with the stomach empty. So no matter if you are a gazelle or a lioness, every time the sun rises, you know you have to run faster, learn faster, and be willing to have these hard conversations with data in order to thrive in these digital transitions. Thank you very much, and if there's some time, I'm open for questions.
That's excellent, Juan. That's I love that analogy too. It's no matter which side you are, you have to run faster. And also just thank you. I know it's been a very I know there's terrible news in Mexico City earlier this week, so I know it's very busy for you. So we're just thankful you could spare some time for us today. So it looks like we have a couple of questions. So one just you mentioned kind of the transformation and some of the things you did to really achieve some of your goals. Is there kind of a, I guess one or two things that you felt that were very much a game changer for you, or like whether it was a decision point or, to your point, a data or an A/B test that was kind of an inflection point in your transformation? I'm just curious if any example you could share with us there.
Yeah, I think the use of newsletters had really opened our eyes, because now we are visiting. We had these very strong digital products, digital editorial products, but we had this huge wall. We used to joke that the only thing we miss to protect the wall is some dragons there. So we have to take the dragons out of the wall, then open some windows. And then we see that through the newsletters, more than 500,000 people are getting some interaction with our digital products. So that has reflected in more traffic to the page and more opportunity to have people that do not know us directly to have some experience with our digital content. We have an additional challenge, which is populism. As you had in the United States a few months ago, you had a head of state that recurrently criticized media. We had the same experience here in Mexico, and for good and bad, most of this lack of empathy to the work of professional journalists in Mexico has been focused in Reforma. Just to give you an idea, the President López Obrador every morning gives a press conference. So in his 2 years in government, he has given around 600 press conferences, more or less, give or take. From these 600 press conferences, he has criticized Reforma more than 380 times. So in a regular week, we have direct criticism, sometimes with slides of our front page in his press conference. So for us was also important to open ourselves to a new audience that might be defined by the views of the president, and show them that we have been a strong, we have made strong and critical journalism. We have criticized all presidents. We have criticized power as a definition of our DNA as a company. But in these times, you could reinvent not just fake news, but you could reinvent history. You could reinvent the history of a country. You could reinvent the history of a newspaper. And what President López Obrador has tried to do in his press conference and the constant reference to Reforma is to reinvent what Reforma as a newspaper has been in the history of Mexican democracy. So opening these windows in the wall has allowed us to reach to audiences that didn't know our content and have certain kind of, at least aim to have certain kind of equilibriums in these national conversations about what Reforma means in the Mexican journalism and what the president thinks. So we are reaching to new audiences and at the same time giving our side of the story, not as the concept that President López Obrador uses is not fake news. He says we have other data, and we say, well, we just have one single kind of data, which is or sometimes data produced by the president's government, by the own government. And what we do every day is bring the truth to our readers. And this digital transformation has also helped us to thrive in these very choppy waters of political populism.
Yeah, that's. I know that the challenge is perhaps in Mexico and some other places are perhaps even tougher for a newspaper to survive, where there's not the kind of luxury of some of the institutions or other just basic things that perhaps we take for granted here. But I think your point on reaching the consumer directly is probably a universal shared insight there. We have one more question, a couple more questions actually. So one is just on your kind of trend in print copies, kind of decline over the last few years, and the trend in digital subscriptions over the last 3 years. I don't know if you can share any specific numbers, but just in general, how those two trends have been realized for you?
No, we haven't reduced the printing days. Actually, I'm very happy and proud because we just brought a wonderful young reporter, and she's going to write exclusively on Saturdays and an op-ed that makes reporting with opinion. It will be in the op-ed page on Saturday. So no, we actually are investing on our Saturday and Sunday editions. Obviously, the Sunday edition has suffered with the pandemic because we had a specific magazine, a weekly magazine on traveling, and obviously we are not doing that much traveling. And we had also a specific section on restaurants in Mexico City, which is not because I'm from here, but I think it's one of the best places to eat in the world. So it was a very thriving section, and obviously now it has suffered. But as a newspaper, we are running from Monday to Sunday. You could get our edition on the streets of Mexico City. And subscriptions are in digital subscriptions are in much better shape than they were 2 years ago. We actually haven't reached the sweet spot, and numbers I would feel totally comfortable. I still feel like the gazelle looking with the side of my eye that there's a lion there and I have to run fast. And I think this feeling is shared by my colleagues. They are in a much better position than they were in 2019. But it's not that I feel that this digital transition has finished. We are not in a position that we could say that the revenue of the newspaper is totally guaranteed by our digital side. We're still have to we're way back for that point. We still have to work hard, have these hard conversations in order to achieve this point. But we are much more closer there than we were 2 years ago.
Are you, one question I think is important to ask is, all the things you're doing are obviously the successes. Are there things that you deliberately stopped doing over the last 2 years, especially as you're kind of leading the transformation, things that you used to do that perhaps you found were not as impactful on digital transformation?
So far, well, one important transition is we have a subscription price, and there the data from MATHER played a relevant part. A subscription price that was focused in protecting print. Now we have a digital price to be competitive in the digital realm. So that was one relevant change that occurred some 18 months ago and was a key part in this increase of digital subscriptions. So far, from our failures, I wouldn't consider them a total failure. I would consider that we should try harder because we're still having good results, not as we expected, but maybe we should put more energy in things like the newsletter, thinking of diversifying and segmentation of newsletters. If we can be as successful as we have been in these kind of broad topic newsletters, I see a lot of potential if we could focus, for example, in these sections I talked about of travel and food. Once the economy keeps on going, and we could see, hopefully it's still months away, but we could see the pandemic in the rear view mirror. Maybe we should think on expanding the newsletters and hopefully having the same impact that we have had in these kind of broad content newsletters.
Again, thank you so much, Juan, for your time today. And as always, I look forward to staying in touch. I'll give it off to Nikki to take us to the next session.
Yeah, thank you, Arvid and Juan. So appreciative of that global perspective that you brought to the symposium.